Hey, g'day, it's Presso and thanks for stopping by. Now here we are, this is episode 6 of building the Cleveland vintage toy car replicas. In today's episode I've got some new materials to show you and talk about, and I've made some decisions about the next couple of steps in the project going forward. Now the thing about this is that these projects are always very open-ended. When I first started this I wasn't even sure I would be able to make these castings, but I got past that point. And then you have to start planning a few steps ahead as you go. But I found out some interesting things about this build, and I want to show you those up close, and then I'll show you the next couple of steps in making the wheels. So yeah, let's have a closer look. Now if you've been following this build, you'll know that I made these tyres for the car, and I made these out of a polyurethane resin. And although they came out okay, I wasn't happy about the colour, and also that they are quite rigid and hard. And although they will be okay for this car, which is just a display and it will go in a glass case and never be used as a toy, this other car I wanted that to be used as a pull-along toy, and for that reason I thought these tyres need to be more rubber-like. Now when I did that episode, a lot of people commented and said you should buy a product by a company called Smooth On, and they said it was perfect for this application. Now I tried to find it using eBay and most of the American websites. The cost was pretty outrageous, to get it shipped here to Australia. Then I found a company called Rowe. They're based in Australia and they sell the Smooth On range of resins. I got in touch with them. They said this is the one to use. So this is called Vitaflex 60. It's got a shore hardness of 60A, and I also bought the pigment that goes with that. So this is a black pigment. Apparently it comes out like rubber. It's same color, same texture. So I'm going to try this. I'll do it off camera. I'll make a couple of tyres using the existing mold that I've got, and if it works I'll show you. But that was the first thing, so that's still to come. Now the other thing is that I need to powder coat these wheels. Now I've got these set up, I've just hung them on a piece of wire and I bolted the two halves of the wheel together with a 3/16 countersunk head screw, and I can hang these and powder coat them, but I also need to sandblast them. So the sandblasting sort of activates the surface and makes it accept the powder coat, and it bonds much better. It also removes surface oxides and oil and any other contaminants. So I'll get all of these done. I've got these ones prepped, but they haven't been blasted yet. That one has been, and they'll all come out with that sort of slightly satin or matte finish, and then we'll do the powder coating. Now another interesting thing happened just yesterday. Now I was cleaning up this car here. This is the original Cleveland Racer. This one's about 100 years old, and it was looking a bit dirty and untidy, and I went inside the cockpit area there with a toothbrush and some household cleaner just to remove the surface dust and oxide and so on, and I found evidence of some red paint down in this corner here. Now when I was doing the original research on this car, I found a website called WorthPoint. They are one of those sort of antique valuation companies. They had photographs of a Cleveland Racer which had obviously been restored. Now in that photograph, which you can see here, all of the cockpit area has been painted red. Now initially I thought, oh, this is just somebody who's gone overboard with the red paint and they've decided to put paint inside the cockpit there, and it's probably not original. But as you can see there is definitely red paint down in that corner and the other corner there. Now because this is so old, there's a chance that all of the original paint has been removed from this car, or it's just simply fallen off over the years. And I started to wonder then whether I should do the same thing on the castings that I've made. Now if I were to sandblast that interior space there and powder coat all of that in red, it would actually fix a lot of the problems I had with the casting texture still being there. So now I'm starting to think that would be the best way forward. So I'm going to mask off that area, or actually mask all of the rest of the car body and leave that exposed, sandblast in there and powder coat in there. So I think that's the best way to proceed with this, and unfortunately I can't find any other images of a Cleveland Racer. There's no record of who sold it, how much it cost, when it was released or anything like that. But yeah, that's the plan, so we'll do that. Now finally, before we get underway today, I have gone ahead and I've modelled the steering wheel for this Cleveland racer car. I took all of the dimensions off the original steering wheel. It was modelled in Fusion 360, but I've imported this into SolidWorks and I've done the 2D drawing. And I am planning to actually prepare a blank piece of stock, but I want to remove as much material from that blank as I can on the lathe before we try and CNC out all of this sort of the detail, the spokes and the space between the spokes and so on. And the reason for that is that my little CNC machine would probably find it a bit tough to actually take this out of a solid chunk of aluminium without getting a lot of chatter or perhaps breaking the tool bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll prepare one on the lathe, and then I've got the tool path worked out, and then we'll see if we can make one. But this is the easiest way for me to make a metal steering wheel for the car. Okay, I'll get these blasted up and ready for powder coating. Okay, they've got a nice uniform finish on them now, but it's important you don't touch them. You don't want to contaminate the surface with skin, oil and so on. So I'll just blow these off with compressed air and then we'll go straight into the powder coating. I've already preheated these wheels in the oven, so they're already up to 200 degrees C. And that just allows the powder to adhere more easily, and it fuses almost straight away. So you put it on a little bit thicker. I find I'm getting a better finish if I do it this way. And it helps to cover up the machined texture of the surface of the wheel. I'm putting this on a bit thicker than I would normally. You can sort of see how that started to fuse already, but this will go back in the oven now, and it needs to stay in the oven at 200 degrees C for about 10 minutes after the powder completely flows out, and that will completely seal the surface of the aluminium and give us a nice glossy finish. You can see how that's starting to go glossy, but it's not fully cured yet. But when they all get to this point, I'll leave another 10 minutes. Well, there's a batch of 5 of the wheels done now, and I've assembled the tyres onto 2 of them just to see how it looks. Later on, I will need to rivet over that piece of projecting brass tube there on both sides of the wheel, and that will keep the 2 halves of the wheel together. But I need to have all of the tyres finished first. And what I need to do next is make a decision about powder coating inside that cockpit area. Now I think I'm going to go ahead with it. What I've done here is I've masked off one of these cars so I can sandblast inside there without damaging the polished aluminium. And then it needs to be masked off again, but we need to use heat-proof masking tape so that when we powder coat inside there and put it in the oven, we don't disturb the tape, and then that will mean that we can avoid getting any powder on the surfaces that are polished aluminium at the moment. You can sort of mask off a lot of it with aluminium foil, but all of these detail edges around here will need to be done with the heat-proof tape. As you can see now, that's all sandblasted inside there. We've got this really nice uniform texture. And what I need to do now is to mask off that same area again, but I'm going to use this specialist heat-proof powder coating tape. So I've got a couple of different widths of this, so it's a bit awkward trying to go around these sort of compound curves. When you get to these corners, it wants to sort of either buckle or crimp. But I'll do the best I can. I'll do it off camera and I'll show you when we're ready to powder coat. Well, I got those more or less prepared now, so I've used the aluminium foil on the two ends. I've got the green heat-proof tape everywhere else, but man, it's hard to get that tape to bond around these compound curves. It's not very flexible and it's not all that adhesive either. So after I take this out of the oven and remove the tape, I'll probably have to clean up some of these areas. There will probably be some powder that goes outside the area that I wanted, but I can easily clean that off. And I want to do these while they're preheated. And the problem with this shape that you see inside here is that you get a thing called the Faraday effect. And instead of the powder being attracted to the metal by electrostatic charge, it sort of gets repelled because of that closed shape. And if I do this hot, I can just lay it horizontal and let the powder sort of rain down from above, and it will bond to the hot aluminium almost straight away. So I think that's the way I'll go. But yeah, it's not terribly clean around these edges here, but we'll do the best we can. That seems to be going pretty well. These are preheated, and I'm earthing each one separately. I'm going to put that back in the oven and let it cure a little bit. Then I'll flip it around and do it from the other side, just to make sure I've got back inside the seat there. Okay, then I'm going to put this back now. I think that's good. Alright, these are still a little bit warm, but we'll see how we got on. Okay, now as I expected, I'm going to need to do some cleaning up around these edges here. So you can see where that's got shiny aluminium just there. I need that to run up both sides, and it's sort of got to run out about that point there. So I can do that with some fine abrasives and Dremel. So I think that'll clean up okay. But the good thing now is that all of the interior of that cockpit has got the same texture. When I initially tried to polish inside there, it was just really hard, but now it all looks pretty good. So super happy with that. I mixed up a batch of resin yesterday and injected it into this same mold that I used to make the polyurethane tyres. So I'm pretty keen to see how this worked out. Hope this hasn't stuck. Alright, that looks very promising. Is it going to come out? Alright, that is perfect. There are absolutely no air bubbles in this. Completely filled the mould. The colour's excellent, and you can see how flexible that is. So yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I thought I'd certainly get some air bubbles at the top. Now, of course, the only downside with this is that it takes one full day to make one tyre. And yeah, that means if I want to make 10 tyres, 10 days, I think I'm just going to do 5, and that'll be for the running car. But yeah, that's great. Looks exactly like rubber in my view anyway. So how does that fit? Take that off. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to make 4 more and maybe 1 spare. And the next thing is, got to get on and make these steering wheels. Now I made up these blanks. Now these are machined just from some scraps of aluminium that I had. And you see there's the actual steering wheel from the other Cleveland car. And what I was trying to do here was get rid of as much of the waste material as I could. And I'm going to set up some tool paths. The first one will actually just take out the spaces between the spokes in the steering wheel. And I've got 2 more which are going to try to do a sort of a rounding over on all of the parts. So I'll get this set up and we'll do the first one, just clearing out the space between the spokes. I've got my steering wheel blank set up in a collet block in the device here. That little hole that you can see there, that's just a random hole that was in the piece of stock that I used to make this. So that'll go away when I cut out the pockets. So I'll show you the tool path. So this is a very simple tool path I made with Kanban. So this is just a pocket with a 1mm depth of cut, and it spirals down through those 4 shapes that you can see there, and that will lead behind the spokes of the steering wheel. And I'm using a 3mm end mill. Now this tool path was done in Fusion 360, and I'm not competent using Fusion 360 for cam, and this one is just a spiral tool path. I'm using a 4mm ball nose end mill. I don't know, it's going to suck it and see, I think. To machine the other side of the steering wheel, I just mounted this on a piece of aluminium, just scrap piece. Got a single M4 socket head cap screw holding that down, and believe me, this is rather precarious. And in order to index this and get it in the correct position, I've got a 3mm pin in the collet, and I've calculated from the drawing a single position here against the spoke, and it's offset 10mm in Y, 3.75 in Y. So if I drive that pin to that position, we should be able to lower the pin and then index this up against the pin. So we'll do that. Alright, so I can lower that down and then just rotate the part until it's butting up against that pin there. You can see that there, and I can lock that down, and then to check it you just drive at 3.75 on the other side of the spoke, and it should come down and just clear the part. So I'll just lock that there, and then we'll go 3.75 in X minus. I just did an MDI there. Right, now that's sort of just clearing, but I think for what I want to do here it doesn't need to be, you know, super precise. We'll just loosen that off again. Alright, I reckon that's good there. Alright, so I've got a tool path set up, and it will just smooth off the back of the spokes and just profile this section of the steering wheel rim out here. Now, probably serious CNC machinists are looking at this right now and laughing, but this will clean up okay. And both those machining operations I did with the ball nose end mill are both roughing strategies, so I didn't expect to get a super high quality finish on this part. But I think that'll clean up. It's going to need some filing. I will mount this back in the lathe and round off the outer edge of the steering wheel rim, and I'll need to clean up that little bit of a artifact on the end there. I left that boss longer than it needs to be to allow for that. So yeah, I think this will be okay. Well, there's one of the steering wheels almost finished now, so this will need sandblasting and then powder coating black to match the original cast iron one. To finish this, it went back in the lathe and I cleaned up the center boss of the steering wheel just using a boring bar. It took a few hits from the ball nose end mill during that machining operation, and the outer rim was cleaned up with a file. I also used some lathe tools just to remove some of the excess stock before going on to the file, but that gave it that rounded profile. Now the spokes were cleaned up mainly using needle files. And I screwed the steering wheel to a piece of wood so I could sort of hold it still while I work with those files. And after removing most of the machining marks with the files, I could move on to using strips of emery cloth and just wrapping them around the spokes and working it backwards and forwards to give it that rounded profile. But the overall result is pretty close to the original, and you know, if you measured them accurately you'd probably find there are differences, but I think this will do. So yeah, pretty happy with that, and I'm getting on with the tyre manufacturing. So I've got two that are done now. I've got a third one in the mould, and a viewer named Vlad got in touch with me a while ago and we were discussing various different ways of making these tyres. Now he has a 3D resin printer, and he experimented with some of the resins that he has, and this is one that he sent me now. This is a black, I think it was a water soluble resin, and he had to scale the tyre to make it fit in the tank, so that's why it's smaller than the original ones that I've got. But he wanted me to see it, and I must say I'm really impressed with the colour and the resolution of this print. It's excellent. And there are flexible resins available. He did actually try printing one of these in a flexible resin and got something which is very similar to what I've got here now. And we were also discussing vulcanizing in rubber, and it's a really interesting process, but getting the raw materials for doing that process is quite difficult. He did track down one source for me, but in the meantime I'd already worked out how to do these urethane tyres, so I think I'll just keep going with that. But thanks for sending that, Vlad. It's whetted my appetite to get into 3D resin printing. Alrighty, so I need to get this steering wheel finished. I'll do both of them actually, then I'll show you before we finish up today. But it all seems to be coming together. Okay, I'm just about to put these cars together so you can see them sort of semi-finished. Now this is the cast iron steering wheel, the original, that came off the Cleveland racer that I was given. Here's the CNC replica. So I sandblasted both the steering wheels. That's sort of standard operating procedure if you're going to powder coat anything. And that also helps to remove some of the scratch marks and the defects that were left over after I finished the hand filing and sanding. And this is it after it's been powder coated. So I used a satin black powder coat. These are really easy to do, and they just go into the oven for the standard baking cycle. And if you look at those close up, there are a few minor differences, but overall pretty happy with these CNC replicas, even given my pretty shoddy tool paths that I made. So now I'm going to put both cars together and I'll show you them, but they're not finished. There'll be one more episode to come, but we'll have a look. Alright, well this is where we're at now. This is the original Cleveland racer here. Here's the two replicas. Now I was able to go around and clean up all the edge of the cockpit and remove that excess powder coat that was there. And I'm really happy with how that steering wheel has turned out. I expected to have a lot more trouble with that process, but it was just perfect. And this car has 3 of the squishy urethane tyres on it at this point. You will get a full set of 5 tyres. But you can hear how that's got a bit of bounce to it, whereas this one, which has got the polyurethane tyres, they're rock hard. And I need to make a decision about whether I'm going to go ahead and make 5 urethane tyres for this car. Now I think probably not. This is just going in a display cabinet, so it doesn't need them, but this one will definitely have the 5 squishy tyres. So at this point I'm really happy with how they've turned out, but what we need to do in the next episode is try to do these panel lines in the body of the car. Now I've got a sort of a vague plan about how that will work, but I'm going to invite you to come back and see the last steps in that process. I'll also do the final assembly on these wheels. Now I haven't done it yet. I'm going to try to bond these urethane tyres to the wheel centres using black silicone, because being a bit squishy, they don't quite sort of get packed together by the rim or the rim halves, so they're going to need some sort of bonding process to make that work, but I think that's fairly straightforward. So yeah, join me in the final episode on the Cleveland racer and we'll see all of that work done on the body of the car to finish it off. Now I'm going to leave you with some footage from around the yard today. We don't have a lot of wildlife. We saw the kangaroo and we've seen the joey, the new joey, but all of the wildflowers coming out, so I thought I'd give you a look at that. So, join me next time. We'll finish off the Cleveland races. So, it's Presso signing out for now. Cheers. Wattles are putting on a spectacular display at the moment. The only trouble is they don't all flower at the same time. You just get itchy when you're lying in the grass all day. is called a hakea. Really unusual, they actually grow the flowers straight off the stems.